Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're glad that you decided to take an hour with us this evening. Okay. So I am Alyssa DeFilippo with Parents Helping Parents, and I manage a program called Connections California, which is an online, statewide resource and information hub for transition to adulthood and adult services. I will put some links in the chat. So if you haven't visited the web pages yet, you can. I'll also put in a link to the calendar so you can see the rest of the spring offerings, and also a link to our latest resource, which is a transition to adulthood timeline. But this evening, you are here to hear how executive functioning affects students' social skills. It is the second in a two-part series. Last Wednesday, our same presenter was here and she did something about more executive functioning in academic setting. That video will be available in about a month in our e-learning library. This evening, though, we welcome back Sarah Firestein. I hope Steinstein?
Firestein, it's okay.
Steen, sorry. Sarah Firestein, I meant to ask you. So Sarah is a senior learning specialist with and a program for education and enrichment relational skills, acronym PEERS, facilitator at Landmark College's Bay Area Success Center in San Mateo. The Success Center provides neurodiverse teens, young adults, and adults with access to resources and supports for success in their executive functioning, academic, and social skills development journey. Sarah has more than 22 years of experience in the fields of social services and education and believes that success means students and families feel seen and heard with an individually curated set of supports. She considers herself a curiosity-driven thought partner and primarily uses a non-directive coaching approach that is aligned with Landmark's evidence-based practices. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, but I'm also going to add that we do have a hard stop this evening of 7:30. So we'll have the presentation. We'll take as many questions as we can before that, and we will end at 7:30 tonight. So thanks for coming, and thanks, Sarah, for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for your introduction. Let me take the screen now myself and get us started. So thanks again, Alyssa and Parents Helping Parents for inviting me back. It's a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed presenting last week as well. So as Alyssa already shared, we are going to be focusing on social skills. And just so we all are clear on our roadmap this evening, we're going to review executive function. I just want to make sure, in case folks couldn't join us last week, that we do revisit that. We are going to be more focused on how these skill sets have an influence on social skills. And then we're going to talk about some strategies. I'm going to highlight some specific ones I think that are particularly helpful for parents and caregivers. And then we're also going to touch on some tips around how we want to continue developing social skills and interests, especially as folks are getting older and maybe transitioning out of school. So on this slide, what I'd like, Alyssa, if you could just tell me, how's the view? Is there anything obstructing, or can you see the slides without anything
Everything
else?
looks good.
Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure.
Sure.
All right, so I know that we're asking everyone to put any questions or comments they have in the Q&A for at the end so that I can address that at that point. But if you will, I'd like to invite you to take a moment and think about the adult merit badges that you see here on the screen. I kind of found this somewhere and I really liked it. But I want us to think about, what are some social skill badges, if you will, that maybe we could include on here. So just so I can read a few off, so you get an idea. There are a couple of them. One of the badges on here says, I ate a vegetable. Another one is, I only watched one episode, and it has like the Netflix symbol. I minded my own business. That's the Kermit drinking the tea. So those are just a couple examples of the badges, but there's nothing up here really that is speaking to some of what we might want to have in our life or kind of accomplish in our life socially. So if you're comfortable, feel free to put any ideas that come to mind in the chat. Thank you. I'll let Alyssa, if you see a couple that you want to read out to us, that would be great. And I know that in some cases, when I talk about adult badges with young adults and adults I work with, sometimes it's something like I am connected to a religious community, right? Socially, that might be a really important aspect. I am, I have like a close friend, something like that, right? We don't all have sometimes close friends. Maybe we have kind of different levels of friends.
Yeah, someone has I will not interrupt. So during conversations, I will not interrupt.
That's a perfect badge.
Yeah.
For executive function and for social skills. That's a great contribution. Yeah. Yeah. I tried my best. I'll listen. I'll listen, take turns.
Yeah, take turns or let's see. I'll be kind when someone needs kindness. I'll be empathetic, maybe just to
Yeah.
uh, uh, define what empathy is.
Yeah. And even just I will take opportunity, like I'll smile at someone when I leave my house today, right? I'll
Mm-hmm.
look for opportunities to connect. So great. Thank you for a couple of those suggestions. I'm gonna keep us going. So last week, if you were with me, we talked a bit about the conductor of an orchestra, and that was sort of an image I wanted to present just as an idea for executive function. Another common one that comes up a lot is an air traffic controller. So just to kind of refresh ourselves, remind ourselves what this term that's very commonly used nowadays called executive function, we're thinking about, if we were in air traffic control and that was our brain, that was the part of our brain that had all the executive function skills in it, there's a lot of tasks, information, coordination that we need to do. So if executive function is fully matured, all the skills are in place, we're really well practiced, well versed, we're going to have a smooth sailing airport where flights can land and depart and everyone's going to safely get to their destination. Now, on the other hand, if executive function is something that we're not putting any focus on, and I'll go into what some of those skills are. If we're not kind of working on them, if we're not realizing that we actually need explicit instruction and practice, then our airport can be a danger zone and very chaotic. So just as a reminder, right, functioning executive function, right, the image of the airport that's a little calmer, right? These are all the things that we need to complete our everyday tasks. And again, this is the idea of how our brains coordinate what we do, say, and think. And what we do, say, and think, that's going to affect all aspects of our life. Of course, tonight we're thinking more about socially how that's going to impact us. And as a reminder, right, as I said last week, there's many different definitions of executive function, and there's many different models of executive function. Some they'll emphasize three skill areas, some up to 30. Last week we looked at 10 essential ones. I liked this graphic because it kind of also just defines each of the 11 aspects of executive functioning skills with an image. So for me, that's sort of sometimes a more helpful way to connect with some of these areas. I'm not going to go through all 11. This is here for you to kind of refer back to. But, I do want us to kind of really think about even just with the comment about I'm going to, not interrupt, or I'm going to be kind. The people that we talked about when we talked about adult social badges, that goes right into that first area of response inhibition, right? Am I going to be able to manage myself? Am I going to be able to work on, stopping and not speaking before really thinking about what's going to come out? And that takes practice and different experiences, but that can make a huge difference socially in classrooms, in our personal lives, in our families, in our volunteer work settings. Again, working memory is a huge piece of executive function, right? And if I have trouble keeping a lot of information in mind, it might be harder for me to track conversations. It might be even hard for me to remember things I'm learning about potential friends, or family members for that matter. And the other two, right, emotional control and sustained attention, those are other areas that are going to impact how we socially are able to connect or sustain relationships. And then I'm going to like swing all the way over to number 10. We talked a little bit about this last week as well, flexibility, right? How able am I to be flexible when I'm hanging out or plans change, or maybe someone else gets invited into a situation that I wasn't expecting, or for instance, I've played as a longtime educator and working with youth of all ages. I played a lot of Uno in my day, and I have come to find that people have various rules about how they play Uno. How flexible will I be to adjust to how the particular setup of that card game is going to go? So things like little things like that make a big difference when we think about where are we at with how developed our executive function is, all of these skills, right? And again, just another snapshot, another reminder, right? All those skills are what kind of helps us manage, sort the information to make decisions and plan, which if we're not thinking about school necessarily right now, we're thinking about our social life. How do we make decisions to initiate friendships or conversations? How do we even make decisions or make plans to, rather than just wait to be maybe asked or have friends reach out to us, how do we set up plans and kind of try to put get-togethers together, for instance? And we looked at this Dr. McCloskey quote last week as well, because I think it's really important to remember this when it comes to executive function, right? All those 11 in this case, right? They're independent skill sets. Some will need more attention if they're not our strength areas, or they don't come as naturally to us. We don't have as many places in our environment, our family, our schools that are modeling and helping us with that, but they do all work in coordination, right? So even if we have strengths in certain of our executive functions, or some of them are developing more rapidly, we do need to understand that if we have challenges or areas that need more attention or need more support, that's going to affect and even impact our strength areas. And we looked again at the brain a bit last week, and we talked a little bit about where the executive functions exist, and it's in that frontal part. This is a side view of the brain. And just as a reminder, and I'm going to show another graphic here in a moment, the way the brain develops, we actually, the brain is maturing for a good 20, 25 years. And so as you can see here, right, it's not fully formed, and it matures from the back of the brain all the way to the front. So, just because individuals in our life, or even if we are still struggling with executive function skills, it may be that, even though we're 20, we're 25, we're 30, depending on kind of how we've been maturing and developing up to that point, we still might be 3 or 4 years behind. And those skills, are needed at various points in our life, but if they're developing at different paces, that can be really frustrating for both the individual and the people in their lives. All the more reason that we, need to be on the lookout for ways that we can try to actively step in and support and model. And in terms of social life, just be ready to talk about, different aspects of relationships and friendships. So I want us to also just be clear, what are some things that we might be on the lookout for, right? We looked at some of those executive function skills, but here's another list to keep in mind, right? As I was mentioning about working memory, if we really struggle to keep names in our mind, birthdays, the interests of our peers, that can be really hard if we can initially make connections with people to sustain and maintain friendships and a feeling of closeness. Some people might not realize that it's really hard for us to keep track of that information, and they might, perceive it differently or find it frustrating that we can't remember some information that maybe for them comes really easily. The listening, the not interrupting, right? That can be really hard. Are we focused? Are we able to give our attention when we're spending time with our friends, right? There's some folks that really, really like to connect verbally through talking. There's other people that they want to connect, but they need to be doing an activity. And we have to also be thinking about, okay, how are we helping people in our lives understand how they're matching or balancing the type of people that they feel drawn to or want to be connected with. If it's hard to, let's say, spend a lot of time with someone that's a big, big talker, but that's really hard to sustain attention for someone that's much more of a doer. We're going in that next one, the starting and stopping activities. Again, that's around that flexibility. That's around that task initiation. That's even in some ways just how you organize and plan through kind of activities and games and how you engage with it. And then we have a couple other things here. I want to kind of move actually to the very bottom, the slow to start and keep peers waiting, right? That indecisiveness, or maybe again, that just having trouble getting started with stuff, at different points, it's going to be less obvious or less of an issue. And then as, and I'm sure some of us have seen this with some of our family members, as our individual progresses through their life, if they're not keeping up maturity wise with the rest of their peers, this can be really challenging, and people can lose patience and lose friendships, right? Because some of the ways they struggle just make it harder for people to want to invest time to spend with them. So I want to kind of jump into what are some, actionable things that we can think about doing to support executive function and support social skills. We talked a little bit about, last week about explicit instruction and modeling and providing scaffolding and routines and, doing different types of environmental support. Tonight, I really want to kind of, we also talked a bunch about helping to build self-awareness, metacognition, which we will touch on as well tonight. But I think these main suggestions are encouraging playful ways to expose, perspectives about relationships, or even, for instance, in this first suggestion, cooperative game playing, I went ahead because I think someone asked me about games last time, and I wanted to just give you specific suggestions to work off of. And what I liked, and when you get these slides from Alyssa, I'm not going to open it, but I've linked in here where it lists 25 different board games, and it's great because it kind of breaks it down by executive function skill. And just naturally, playing games creates a lot of necessity to work on teamwork, work on sportsmanship, work on turn taking, and being patient. I've played just the game. Sorry, is not on this list. These are much more advanced or kind of complicated board games. But just the game. Sorry, I've played with folks, and it can be really powerful for someone to take leadership and explain the rules, and then display patience with the other people playing when they need ongoing prompting or reminders of how to play the game. So even if the 25 suggestions in that link are not ones that appeal to you or too big of an investment right now, again, card games, basic board games, just things real time that we have to sit together, we have to be in, side by side or sitting around a table. And this can start as a family fun night. This can even be something that, if an individual really starts getting into certain kinds of strategy games or board games or card games, eventually could also be just other ways to connect with peers or organize events to include peers or host peers. Some lower prep games I wanted to include on here. And then again, there's a link here that just explains, if you're not familiar with these, with Would You Rather, if you've never played this game. These are all more conversational games. These are things you can set up just at home, on little index cards if you like. And like I said, it breaks down and explains each of the three games in a little bit more detail. But the conversation starters, that kind of also just links and bridges into role playing and rehearsal, right? A lot of folks that have executive function challenges around that working memory, around attention, even around emotional regulation and that sort of thing. Some of it is the frustration of like they're having trouble finding the words or the language or the timing of how to initiate a conversation, how to join a conversation, or in some cases, even how to respond. There's a lot of moving parts that's happening when we're in conversation with people. Some people prefer and feel more comfortable, of course, texting or using other online platforms because that allows them to process and pace their communication a little bit. But the more we can support and make fun games in terms of just practicing some of this stuff, giving a lot of practice, kind of building some of those neural pathways up of, oh, I've had this conversation before. This is a common topic that comes up amongst people, and this is what usually is talked about. It's a lot easier in time with practice and reinforcement to access some information to bring forth in conversation. So that conversation starter game fits really into role play or rehearsals, different social scenarios. So if you're, getting ready to go to a birthday party, you're getting ready to go to your first day, on the job. If you're getting ready to go to a big family reunion this summer, right? There's things ahead of time to maybe practice around different social interactions. I think the other piece is taking opportunities, not putting too much on yourself of buying a bunch of games or even setting up some of these smaller games or doing the role play if that feels, like it's not going to work for the individual in your life, or that might just come across as they're not ready for that. It's too intimidating. Take advantage of being out in your day to day, on your errands, getting together family on the weekends, right? And there's this concept of being a social spy. And on the last slide, we have some resources. The woman who kind of coined this phrase, she just encourages parents, family members to, again, like we talked about last week, like make your thinking of what you're noticing explicit. Say out loud what you're noticing, what you're interpreting, what are things you're picking up on, what are attributes you're reading about another person, maybe on how they're interacting with other people. Teach those skills of being able to scan and take notice, right? I know like when we have really, really little ones, we have to help them understand this, just their personal space when they're in public and that they're not flailing all around or, being really, really loud in certain public settings. Same thing. There's all these less overt, obvious things when it comes to social interactions, conversation, how people are connecting, that if we kind of try to talk about them, name them, just in situations that could be really helpful just to bring awareness to. And the last one I really liked, and I hope, when you get the slide, you'll go and you'll click on this. There's really 10 great phrases, go-to questions that you can ask. And it's kind of, you can tinker with them a little bit if you want to make them, if you're not talking to someone that's in that 5 to 15 range and you're talking to someone a little bit older, you can slightly tinker some of those questions, but I think they're really good phrases if you have detected or it's clear that there's some struggles going on, there's some challenges. These phrases are really meant for individuals that have just not experienced a lot of social success. Maybe they've actually been rejected or they've experienced a lot of isolation. Because there's a lot of folks with executive function issues and things that are just taking longer to develop or not coming as easily, that they're quite strong socially. And it might not be that they can't make friends or get connected, it's that they have trouble managing friendships or managing conflict that comes up in friendships, how they deal with their own emotions or how they respond to others. But there are some individuals that experience quite a bit of social isolation and rejection. So I wanted to give just a starter place to engage and just gently kind of try to get a little bit more information about what your individual's experience is like. Also, I, as you heard in my introduction, I'm a peers facilitator with the Success Center, and I use this graphic with my cohorts just to kind of, again, help explicitly give a framework of different tiers and categories of relationships and friendships, and giving just some initial names to it. And sometimes this is very revealing about how the individual thinks about it. They might have a very different idea of categories or tiers of friendships. They might not think about it in a pyramid. So we can this can be a starting point to help define how they think of friendships, but it also can help them realize in some cases that they didn't think they had any friends. They look at a list like this and they realize, oh, I have some acquaintances and possible friendships. I don't have 0 friends. Maybe I'm not sure how to take a level 3 friendship into an evolving friendship. Or maybe my real desire is I don't have what I feel is a best friend or a close friend. That's such a huge narrative that we're supposed to have a best friend or a really good close group of friends. So then, we kind of name and sort of put some more names and explain how that might look. We can also think about, what are some supports or strategies to help them move closer if their goal is to have move a possible friendship, let's say, to an evolving friendship. Or what would be the steps, right? But when we think about executive function, sometimes planning, sometimes goal setting is really foreign and really, really hard and kind of even hard to imagine. So sometimes we need to give a framework, give some names, and then together think through what would be some steps or what are the missing pieces of information that an individual might need to attain a goal that they might have. They might have the goal might come easily to them, but they might not know the smaller steps to get there. So sometimes just by opening up that conversation with them, this is a tool that's helpful to do that. I hope you'll feel free to use it. So I also want us to think about what are supports that young adults or adults that are going to need social connection or are still struggling with social connection, what are some things that might help them? Because when we, are finished with schools, or in some cases, when folks age out of certain types of programs or are not fits for different kinds of day programs, or depending on what's going on, if they're not going to community college, or not going on to college, it can become very challenging to figure out how to help them maintain a social circle or community or even access to peers. So I wanted to just at least put 3 ideas on here, some of which maybe you guys have heard about or are familiar with some of these ideas. But Hit Record is a really interesting online platform if the individual in your life is very, very artistic and creative. And I always mess up the guy's name. It's a 3-namer. Gordon Levitt, I think his name is. He and his brother started this online platform. And it's just this really cool space where, like right now it's April, and so they're doing a poem a day, but there's calls for all kinds of creative projects, and people put up art, and I linked you to the site where it kind of explains about what Hit Record is and sort of the rules of this community. And one rule is that people are allowed to remix other people's art. So if something's posted up there and you see it, and a lot of people, that are neurodivergent or have executive function challenges, they might see the world in a very interesting or unique way that is not how other people see it. So it might be a place to get inspired off other people's work and, reinterpret it. And this just might be a way to stay involved in wanting to do art projects, having a reason to go to an art store or take art classes, to maybe be connected to this, international online art community. I also put up Meetup as the next suggestion. And for those that aren't familiar with this platform, I haven't heard about it in a while, it is still a very useful place for people to both find in-person and online activities, right? The big thing, with social connection is really trying to encourage that people are matching themselves to friendships, or, trying to do activities that are really coming from their genuine interest that will highlight some of their ability to focus, their ability to maybe be flexible or to take leadership roles, or just to be more open and willing to talk about stuff. It's great to expose people to all different kinds of experiences and events and activities, but there also needs to be, I think, a lot of support and time given to honing in on what are your special interests, that will have more, there'll be more opportunities that will come from that to find maybe some more natural ways to connect, or there'll be a little bit easier time. For instance, if you're talking to someone about a special interest, a special game that you really like, a video game, let's say, or a book series that you're very, very involved in, someone with working memory issues, right, that have trouble holding all the information in their mind, if they are talking about something they're really, really familiar with, know inside out, it'll be a much easier way to build how to have some conversations about that versus any random topic that could come up in any given social situation. Do they need support with rehearsing and role playing some of that? Absolutely. But some of that might come a little bit easier if they're working through an interest area that's really innate to them. Last thing is the volunteer match, and there's so many different sites about, for local. I picked one that could be, for your local area, and I know we have people from all over California joining this meeting. But again, there's all kinds of volunteer sites, and depending on your different connections to your school or different community organizations, there's a lot of ways to get involved. I will say that some folks that are still developing their executive function find it much more comfortable and much more manageable to engage with people in a social way when they're in a service situation. They have a very defined role, right? I am here to, help clean up for this, music event that's going on. I set up the chairs and I take the tickets, and there can be some interaction that's happening there. There can be some meeting of other volunteers, or maybe in time, even if that's something that's a regular position that they do, if there's regular people that attend those events, there can be some connections that come out of that. But there are some people that really shine socially and can put into practice, good ways to start conversations or try to connect with people when they are in a very defined role. And for some individuals in our life, that's going to be in their work life. Some individuals, might struggle with work, or they need more time and they need a lot more support to manage the work world. So in the interim, volunteering, I think, is a really great way to be out in the community, to explore other interests, to build work skills. Or if work is something that's very, very challenging and might not be as manageable, then that's a way to continue to be connected and contribute to your community, and also find social connection. So I want to just kind of wrap up here and go over our resource list, and then open up for questions if we have those. But I wanted to remind everyone, and as I said this last week, that executive function skills, social skills, all of that, right? We need direction, we need guidance, we need explicit help and support and examples. And if we're able to get that, those skill areas will develop, and they will develop through those interactions and through a lot of practice. And it's, even if we have challenge areas, we can still work on them, little by little. And I hope some of the suggestions tonight were maybe some starting points to think about doing some of that. I do want to just say that it can feel really overwhelming if there's so much that one's managing in terms of other needs of your individual. So there might be times in which you want to consider outside resources, such as peers, which is a particular social pragmatics program outside of UCLA. And if people have some questions about that, I can answer a little bit more, but I've linked here. You can go to their site, you can learn a little bit more about it. If you're looking for people that have this training that inform the way that they do social and relational skills, some people really can fit well with that type of curricular approach. Another one that I believe is outside of, I'm going to say Boston, or there's a couple people that have developed HEARTS, which stands for Healthy Relationships on the Spectrum. That's another thing that's a bit shorter than peers, and it's a bit more focused, I think, on relationships maybe that maybe we wish to make romantic or outside of maybe just friendships. It's kind of probably a little bit of both friendships and relationships, romantic otherwise. But these are two just as some points of reference. And then finally, I wanted to make sure you had additional resources just on executive function. We're working on executive function. There's always opportunities to work on how we're communicating, how we're listening to each other, how we're, working together and asking for what we need. I did find something that was kind of cool in the handy handouts that had some English and Spanish handouts ready to go. And the very last one here, article with 10 suggestions, this is coming from the same woman, I'm blanking on her name right now, it's Caroline something, who has written a book recently, Why Won't Kids Play With Me? And also is the person who also kind of I inserted earlier in the slides that has the 10 questions or phrases. If you're noticing that the individual in your life that you're concerned about is maybe really having a tough time socially, not connecting or being left out. So these are all good places to kind of check out. But that last one might be also helpful too. So
thanks, Sarah, once again for this great presentation.